Hey everyone, welcome to the lecture over anatomy and physiology of the male reproductive system. We're going to go ahead and start by talking about the testes. So the testes are going to be these small oval-shaped structures located within the scrotum, and they are responsible for producing the beginning part of the sperm. They're going to go through meiosis and create those cells that only have 23 chromosomes in them, but they also function to produce a ton of testosterone for the developing man, and then testosterone levels throughout the rest of his adulthood. Now, the scrotum itself is just the sac that covers the testes. It divides the left and right testes into the two chambers, and depending on the temperature outside, the scrotum will either pull the testes up closer to the male or pull them farther away. Now, sperm is produced best at 96 degrees Fahrenheit. As you guys know, body temperatures for humans range around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, even though we're finding it to be a little bit cooler now. And so the scrotum hangs outside of the male's body so that the sperm can be produced in an optimal environment. So meiosis is something that you should have covered in biology a while ago. Meiosis produces 4 haploid cells in the end. And I remember it's 4 because there's 4 vowels in meiosis. And so we start out with the primary cell, and that cell is going to go through a ton of mitosis, so that way we always have that primary cell in stock. And then from there, it's going to go through 2 rounds of division, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, which eventually is going to lead into 4 cells, dividing up the chromosome number from 46 to 23. Now, spermatogenesis is the proper term for producing sperm. Meiosis will apply to both eggs and sperm, so spermatogenesis is the production specifically of sperm. It's going to start in the seminiferous tubules of the testes. You can kind of see those here within this picture, and they are going to kind of mature. First thing that's going to happen is meiosis, and we're going to cut the chromosome number from 46 to 23, and then eventually the other structures for the sperm cell are going to be produced. Now, in the beginning, the testes are going to be produced during embryonic development, so while the baby is gestating within the female. But once that boy hits puberty, then the primary spermatocytes are going to start going through meiosis, and sperm are actually going to be produced. Mature males on average can produce around 1,500 sperm every second. In class, I'll say this, and I guess I'll also say it here. For males, it is much more about quantity over quality. For females, it is the opposite, quality over quantity. And for males, just having that quantity is really going to increase their chances of passing on their genes and fertilizing an egg later on. So the sperm cells themselves are only comprised of a few different segments. The first part is the acrosome, and that's going to be the covering of the head of the sperm. And this is going to be really important for penetrating all of the layers around the egg and making sure that the sperm cell can actually break through to then fertilize the egg. The head contains the nucleus with only 23 chromosomes, which will eventually combine with the egg's 23 chromosomes and make a human, which is 46 chromosomes. The midpiece contains a ton of mitochondria so that the flagellum can actually have the energy to propel itself along throughout the female reproductive tract and eventually meet with the egg itself and fertilize the egg. So that midpiece is packed full of mitochondria to generate the energy needed for the sperm to travel up the female's reproductive tract and fertilize. So, in the testes, this is where sperm production starts. In the end, we end up with just a spermatid. But once we get into the epididymis, we actually mature the sperm cells and create a legitimate sperm cell there. The epididymis is tucked right behind the testes. It's this little piece right there, and it starts on the top and then it moves posterior. This is around 6 meters long, which is about as tall as a T-Rex, I believe. And so it's a massive structure, a massive tube, but it is tightly coiled up and condensed and nestled right behind the testes. This functions to mature the sperms and get them ready for swimming eventually. It helps put the final touches on the acrosome, on the midpiece, and eventually the flagellum, so that once the sperm combine with the semen, they are actually able to swim. the way that the sperm are going to move through the epididymis, while they are getting their flagellum, they are not swimming. They are moving via peristalsis, which is that smooth muscle contraction going from one direction to another. And so the sperm cells are just being pushed and squeezed along the 6-meter tube that is the epididymis. And then eventually, before ejaculation, those sperm cells will be moved via peristalsis up into the vas deferens as well, and then eventually ejaculated out. So the vas deferens, if there's anything that I want you to retain from this lecture, it is this little slide about the vas deferens. It is most important because you're probably going to encounter some information about the vas deferens with vasectomies. So a vas deferens is a tube that is going to connect the epididymis eventually around to the seminal vesicle, the prostate, and eventually into the urethra. So it is what takes the sperm and moves it to the area where it will eventually be ejaculated. So another big clarifying statement, sperm and semen are not the same thing. So vas deferens is just taking the sperm, it is using peristalsis to squeeze it up and around and combine that eventually with the semen. So a vasectomy, this is male birth control that is going to last forever. Now, there are some cases where it doesn't work, and that's just because the separation of the vas deferens was not complete. And that's not super common, but it does happen from time to time. So the idea is if you separate the vas deferens and make it so that these tubes don't connect anymore, then the sperm will never be able to get from the testes up and out and into the urethra. And so the sperm that are produced here are eventually just going to be broken down. Nothing bad's going to happen. It's not like they're going to accumulate or anything. And the male is still able to ejaculate with the semen that is produced in the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland, but there's just no sperm in it. All right, so next we have the seminal vesicle as well as the prostate itself. Now, both of these work to produce different things to produce semen, but more specifically, the seminal vesicle is going to be producing an alkaline or basic fluid, a little bit of fructose to provide energy for the sperm, as well as prostaglandins to stimulate uterine contraction to help kind of suck up the sperm and semen into the female's reproductive system to ideally fertilize an egg. The prostate is going to secrete a thin, milky, alkaline fluid. Once again, it's a little bit basic in nature, and that's going to allow for the sperm to survive better within the female's reproductive system. Within the female, it is a little bit more acidic, and so by having that slightly basic fluid, it is going to neutralize the fluid and allow for the sperm to survive a lot longer. After that, we have the bulbourethral gland, and it is found directly inferior to the prostate, but still along the urethra here. So the bulbourethral gland is going to be producing a bunch of mucus. It is called pre-ejaculate. Most people know it better as precum, and this is going to help lubricate the gland's penis for better penetration later on. So in general, what I want you guys to get from this, semen is the fluid that sperm swim through. And so it is there to help the sperm survive within the female's reproductive system so that they can eventually get to the egg to fertilize it. It is produced by a couple of different glands, including the seminal vesicle as well as the prostate. And it can range depending on who the male is. It can either be 2 to 5 milliliters, and depending again on the male, it can range in how many sperm are found in each milliliter as well. So the penis. This is what transfers both urine and semen to the outside. So for males, this tube is dual purposed. The body or shaft contains a couple of different cavities here that are going to be filling up with blood in order to maintain an erection. Penises are hydrostatic organs, hydro meaning water, static meaning staying in place. And so it is filled with fluid, which is blood for us, and that's what gives it a rigid shape or structure. Now the glans penis is going to be the tip. It is enlarged, it is very sensitive, and naturally it is covered by something called the prepuce or foreskin. In the United States, we tend to do a lot of circumcision because we are very, very focused on hygiene. And the idea is that if you remove the foreskin, it is going to be more hygienic. However, if you're showering every day and just cleaning using soap and water, there is no downside to having a foreskin there. It's just something in the United States that we see tend to be removed from males. Now, during sexual arousal, there are a couple of things that are going to happen in order to allow for the penis to become firm and rigid. First, the parasympathetic nervous system is going to be activated, and this is going to cause nitric oxide, which is NO, to be released, which dilates the arteries in the penis and then ends up constricting the veins. If you recall from our circulatory system, arteries always go away, whereas veins come back to the heart. So because the arteries are dilating and the veins are constricting, that means blood is able to flow into the penis, but not out of it, making it very rigid and full of that blood. In the end, this is what makes an erection. And then after more arousal, there are two things that are going to happen. Emission, which is when we take the sperm and move that from the vas deferens and put that into the urethra. And this is going to be accompanied with the seminal fluids as well as the prostate fluids. And then ejaculation is when the semen eventually moves to the outside. Now I have this little list of events here. First, we have the bulbourethral gland secreting the mucus in order to create easier penetration. The prostate gland is going to be secreting some fluids, the sperm, and then eventually the seminal vesicle. So it kind of goes in that order. And then after ejaculation, there's something called the refractory period, which is when the blood vessels are moving back to their original state, the penis returns to its flaccid state, and the male is not able to be aroused again for a small period or longer period of time. Once again, this really just depends on who you are as a person. So good little tricks for the future if you end up going into the medical field and need to know this. The parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for erections in males, and the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for ejaculation. So point and shoot, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So the male reproductive system is also producing a ton of testosterone, and that's also going to be important. Testosterone is going to be working within the testes to help produce a male that has a ton of body hair. It's going to largen the cords here, the larynx, and make that voice kind of drop down a little bit. It actually produces thicker skin, so the epidermis is thicker on males, and increases muscular growth, which is why males tend to have more muscle density than females. So testosterone is incredibly important for males. We also see a couple other hormones, and I skipped forward this earlier, and this goes back to the pituitary gland. We have the hypothalamus is going to secrete gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH, and then that triggers the anterior pituitary gland to release ICTH, or luteinizing hormone, as well as FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. So ICSH, which is going to help stimulate the cells to produce more testosterone, and then FSH is also going to be producing more testosterone. So both of these hormones here are eventually going to lead to higher levels of testosterone. Males are kind of unique in that they are going to be, after puberty, producing relatively the same levels of testosterone and sperm their entire lives. Eventually, as they get older, the testosterone levels are going to drop, and that's when some males are put on testosterone shots or injections in order to increase that. But in the end, males can have babies essentially until they die, as long as they are maintaining high levels of testosterone and everything is working properly. Whereas females eventually are going to go through menopause and no longer be able to have children. Which is why you see some people like Jeff Goldblum being in their 60s having children with younger women. I hope that this lecture was informative for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.